Hello everyone, this is James Shore with another test-driven JavaScript video. I'm recording this on September 17th, 2012, picking up right where we left off in the last episode. And what we are doing is we are trying to modify our smoke test so that it works the same way as our code will, or so it tests that our code will work when it's deployed to Heroku. And to do that, we were parsing our proc file. And I promised at the end of the last episode that we'd go through that in detail. So here's what happens here. It's, by the way, it's all for naught. I did a tiny bit of trivial research during the break, and all the time we spent on parsing this was not needed, but I'll get into that in a moment. So here's how it works. Reread the file. So what we need to do is there is a file called procfile that defines how our application is going to run, how Heroku is going to run our application. It starts with the word web, and then it has the actual command line. So what we do is we read that file into a variable named procfile. We trim off all the white space, the carriage return at the end and so forth, and we look for the word web followed by everything. And that matches, whatever. If that's null, then we couldn't match. We couldn't parse. Then we pull out the thing that matched, so everything after the web, into command line. We split it so that we've taken, we break it into its component pieces, and you can see that here. So we have a blank, the word node, blah, blah, blah. Then we filter out all the blanks here, and we turn the word port into the word 5000, and that leaves us with this node, comma, source server wiki paint 5000. Perfect. That works. And that's great, except that I neglected to do something really important before I started this. Something really basic, essential, something you should always do before writing code that isn't an important part of your application. And this is not a particularly important part. I forgot to look to see if anybody had done this before. And guess what? They did. And they did a better job than me. So I can just, in theory, say npm install procfile. Whoa. That's something about my internal system. Hold on one second. I'm going to check that out. Okay, I'm back. I think that's a minor bug in the procfile implementation or the way they're working with npm. I'm not going to worry about it. So I should be able to. Now, my procfile is working, but it's, for something like this that's really not essential, I would rather not have our own code. I'd rather use somebody else's code. So I'm just going to see what happens if we use his code. And if it doesn't work right away, I'm not going to go into depth on it. Here's how it works. We need to read our procfile. Actually, let's keep that as is just in case. And then we say procfile.parse, and that should give us an object. Yeah, that looks promising. So, yeah, we can just return an object, return this object here. I mean, to start with, this will work exactly. So the web command is equal to parse.web. And then our array, I'm just gonna modify this. Let's return that. So what we're doing is we're pulling out just this command and options. There we go. Now this should be just a matter of saying command line dot command and command line dot options, and that should work. except that it didn't. Oh, because it didn't convert port into 5000. Ha. Yes. So we do need to go ahead and do the mapping. That we did before. There. That works perfectly. Okay. So let's yeah, that's great. We're going to want to keep that for sure. So let's go ahead and delete all of this and clean this up. So I'm gonna put this up here, I think. And then here we can inline this. And then let's rename this to web command. And we'll map that there, and that should still work. Yes. Okay. So, yeah. And let's actually make this a little more explicit. We'll pull that out, back out into file data like that. I think that cleans it up a little bit. Okay, so we're reading the file, we're parsing it and pulling out the web command, and then we are converting the web options to change that and returning the result. Okay, and here, yeah, I think that's pretty nice. Command line.command, command line.options, and so forth. We no longer need all this logging. Great. Okay, finally, that's done. So now we can deploy this puppy to Heroku. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to take a moment to refresh my memory of how that works, and then we'll get to it. Okay, I'm back. So Heroku has a nice little guide about how to get started, and we've logged in, we've got an app. Now we need to declare dependencies with Node Package Manager. Now it says that the way it knows it's node.js is by the existence of package.json. So we need to create that. So it needs to have declare our engines. The node version we're using is 0.8.6, although it allows us to put in a .x to say whatever version. That's actually, I prefer to be very specific, just in case. Now, and the NPM version, I suppose we ought to know as well, 1148. Okay. Now, Heroku recommends that we not include our dependencies in our repository. It actually wants us to define them in the JSON file. I'm really hoping that we don't have to do that, because I love having our dependencies in the actual repository. And there's a good reason for this, because this means that we don't, that our repository is self-contained. This means that we can take our repository, give it to anybody, and it will just work. It will work if there's no internet. It will work, period. And a good example of this is that recently somebody contacted me saying that they couldn't get it on Windows. It wasn't running, and the reason it wasn't running is because they were using jake.0.3.16, which is supposed to just be a bug fix version, and it broke the file list feature of Jake. And when he was just using the code directly as it was in the repository, it worked fine. But when he manually updated it, it stopped working, and he was wondering what was going on. So that's the kind of thing that if we have our own copy of the code, that doesn't happen. Now, in theory, we could specify exactly which versions of Jake we wanted, but I would rather just not deal with it. So I'm hoping we don't have to put that we can just upload the node modules along with everything else and it will work. Because I don't like having dependencies on anything outside the repository because they break. If you can get it all working internally, great. And this is, I think, something that is a feature. It's something that the Ruby community has gotten wrong and is really hurt them a lot. They've got all these dependency management issues, and Heroku comes from a Ruby background, and I think I think they're wrong. Dependencies, their 12-factor app manifesto, as I mentioned, is right. The dependencies should be explicitly declared and isolated, but not just declared and isolated. They should be included in the repository. I think this is really important to prevent defects and weird, annoying problems. So anyway, off my soapbox, we've hopefully done that right. Hopefully Heroku will allow us to have our node modules just defined. I'm going to be really annoyed if they don't. We've declared our process types with Procfile. Now we should be able to deploy. We have to have it in Git, which we do. I'm going to go ahead and commit added. And by the way, I note that we now have duplication between our package.json and our jakefile.js. We duplicate the node version, so we need to fix that. But that can come later. So, okay, so we've got it into Git. We create the app. Let's see. It will create a random name for us. But let's see if we can create WeWikiPaint. Oh, that seems to be working. So now we've got wewikipaint.herokuapp.com, and now we should be able to deploy it. So when we created it, it added a remote to our repository, so we should be able to say git push Heroku master, and the fingerprint, I'm going to double check that back in a moment. Okay, yep, that is valid. So we'll store that, and it's pushing it. And it didn't work. It wants, okay, there's something wrong with the JSON file. Something, couldn't read the dependencies. Okay, so something's up. Well, we'll have to fix that next time. Thanks for watching, everybody. I will catch you next time.